Here comes the rule of the government, and they have set strict targets to be followed by the entire nation. So they have 2060 net zero carbon goals. This means all the businesses should be trying to work towards the achievement of the net zero goals. So this also means that all the companies should work on decarbonization plans. They should be able to report the carbon emissions. At the moment, it's voluntary, but in a very few years, it will be mandatory for some of them to some extent. This opens the door for so many things like biodiversity, biogain, how we're also building our projects. Are we just conserving the environment? Are we destroying the environment? And I hope this can be mandated and required officially for all of the projects soon.
Before we go into the podcast, if you could just go and rate this show on whichever platform you're listening to it, it makes a huge difference to the podcast, the amazing conversations we get to have, and the incredible guests we're able to get on the podcast. So it's probably not something you would think about, but if you could just go rate the show, follow it, or share an episode, it does make a huge difference to the show. Thank you so much. In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schipf, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. Karim is a true expert in sustainable architecture, starting out as an architect in Egypt and then earning his master's degree in Edinburgh. Karim has evolved from designing award-winning concepts to driving sustainability in huge projects in Saudi Arabia. Now as a senior manager at Saudi Entertainment Ventures 7, he's at the forefront of making sustainable design a reality. Karim's passion is all about making buildings that are not only functional, but also very kind to the planet. He's learned that true sustainability isn't just about checking boxes. It's about integrating responsible practices into every layer of the project. Today we're going to hear about how Karim balances visionary design with real-world sustainability, why he believes the future of sustainable architecture is all about reducing carbon emissions, and what's it like to develop in the unique environment of Saudi Arabia. I can't wait for you to hear his story. Thank you so much for joining me, Karim. It's a pleasure to have you here. So before we go deep into the topic of sustainability and architecture, why don't you start by telling me a bit your story? How did you get where you are today? You're a senior manager in sustainability at 7, a development company in Riyadh. What made you want to go deeper into sustainability?
I started my career as an architect. So I have a bachelor degree of architecture. And I have a master's degree in building services engineering, which is a bit more related to architectural engineering. So my background is architecture from Alexandria, Egypt, and my master's is from Heriot-Watt in Edinburgh. But I was fascinated about sustainable design since I was a student in Alexandria. I used to always focus on sustainable design because I felt that all the designs should be responsible. And I had a passion towards how the building is interacting with the environment in general. To be honest, it was not for being responsible. It was just the beauty of integrating the environment into the architectural design. And this means a bit more about biodiversity and integrating vegetation and things related to sustainability. That led to more studies, more interest in this kind of field. And I started working on conceptual designs. And you know that conceptual designs allows you to be innovative and to imagine anything you want and apply it on your projects. It's not similar to the practical architecture that we used to do in studios or offices, because in offices you're limited by the client directions, the client requirements, mostly functional requirements. But in conceptual designs for competitions, it's always open to us to decide, to imagine, and to create things beautiful from CGIs, but at the same time, it's also sustainable. So I started to investigate further how to make my designs more sustainable, how to think out of the box, and how to also look for the social aspects. I worked on so many competitions, so I won a few of them as well. In Evolo competition, we won a competition for an Evolo residential tower, and we were using the garbage to be used as an oil or a fuel, and in an area that's a bit congested. In another project in Greece, we also made a change to a facade for a building, and we managed to put an idea that allows the people in the city, it's called Piraeus City in Greece, to integrate in developing the facade. And that was part of a social responsibility, that to make each person in the city participating in the development of this new project. It was just a conceptual idea, but it went well, and we got a special mention in this competition. Later on, I found myself that I cannot continue working on conceptual designs, and I need to be more practical and work on actual projects. So I joined a construction company in Saudi Arabia. That was 2015. And I was working at the time as a lead coordinator. And I took a lead accreditation, lead AB, well AB, and a few other accreditations related to sustainability, just to make sure that I'm not just putting ideas in the air without actually implementing them. So it was a good opportunity for me to participate in an actual project, in a LEED certification, and it went well. And we were investigating materials, investigating the chemicals that we're using in construction. We were also checking the pollution of our project sites. So all these kind of things are not possible if I'm only working on paper and designs. And I stayed in contracting, working on another magnificent project in Bahrain, Bahrain International Airport, and we achieved 3 LEED Gold certifications. Then I went to consulting side. And when you work on consultations, you are putting yourself into a greater exposure. Different rating system, different strategies, different companies. And it was fascinating because it's not only one client, it's not only one project. You have to work on so many projects at the same time. And I enjoyed it, to be honest. And after a couple of years, I went to a client site, Roshan Group, which is one of the Giga projects here in Saudi. And then recently, from 7 months, I'm now in Saudi Entertainment Ventures, 7. And they're making the ecosystem for the entertainment sector in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, it's shifting between contracting to consultation, and then at the end, I'm at developer side.
So now, what does your day-to-day role as a senior manager in sustainability for 7 look like?
Because it's a client-side role, and I always been saying to myself when I was a consultant, if the client is not willing to invest in something, it will never happen. And the client is always the driver behind any sustainable movement or sustainable development. Because all the clients and all the developers are developing something, but not all of them are developing with responsibility and care to the environment. Not only the environment for sure, because here we're talking about ESG, and that's environmental, social, and governance. It's not an easy job because we are driving the market as well. We are requesting and putting targets for the entire supply chain. And the entire supply chain needs also to adapt to the needs of the clients. So when we look at a specific certification that we would like to implement, we're setting the target and we're putting this, the vision, and we're setting this target on a specific project, for example, in our portfolio. This means that the consultants needs to hire a sustainability consultant or deliver something responsible. Also, the contractor are going to provide and deliver something that's responsible. Like when we talk about construction, this means a lot of things, like investing in local materials, recycled materials. That's also something beneficial for the economy when we're focusing on things related to sustainable practices. So mainly we're defining the strategies for the business, defining sustainability, how it should be tackled on a corporate level, We're also tracking day-to-day the ongoing progress for the projects, design, construction. So that's mainly how we're dealing with this. And of course, sometimes you need also to discuss with the stakeholders in the market to align on different strategies and different targets.
And in your role, what is your biggest challenges convincing the developers to build more sustainably?
So there are so many challenges, and this is not only here, it's in every developer site. Because you're always have a tight budget, and you have to design with the budget. And there is a misconception I've seen everywhere that sustainable buildings are costing more or actually expensive, because always they're looking only at the capex or the initial and upfront investment. And this should not be the way that people think. And we should not only look at the upfront costs, because the benefits from sustainability lies in the operational costs as well. You might purchase an expensive MEP system for air conditioning. But it might be a bit more expensive, but at the end, you will be also saving money during operation. And that's the beauty of the green building designs. That's one of the main challenges that we're seeing. Also because sustainability sometimes is looked at an add-on or a luxury thing. Some people are looking at it as it's something that was not there in the market before. And now we're seeing people who are working as a sustainability professionals, full-time sustainability professionals. So it's something new for them. And to be able to tackle this, we need to have an open channel of communication with them, explain to them, represent this in an appropriate way, show them some studies as well, because some studies are showing that green buildings are not causing much expenses for the projects. And of course, I'm not saying it's not causing as something certain, because sometimes it causes an amount of expenditure to be paid, but it depends on so many factors. When we tell someone that we need to be sustainable, they often think that we are requesting from them or requiring them to add PVs, renewable energy. But that's not what we want. We want them first to go through the architectural process that allows for a more mature and sustainable building. Like, for example, start with a passive design. Passive design doesn't cost anything. It's just a matter of understanding a performance-based design approach, doing some simulation on the design, and then you will find yourself delivering a product or a project that's sustainable. And then focus on energy efficiency. Replace what causes you to consume a lot of energy with things that can consume less. Reducing the lighting system, changing the air conditioning system. So all these things can happen before thinking that sustainability is only BVs or renewable energy. Of course, I'm a person who loves renewable energy, because at the end, we're not using oil or fossil fuels. We're relying on renewable pure energy, and it's not depleting. But at the end, people are looking at the capex, and it causes them to pay a lot. And sometimes also, when you look at it from their perspective, sometimes the management are going to ask them for the capex and not for the opex. And that's also tricky, and you have to deal with this.
You have a strong passion for sustainable architecture, especially with the conceptual design projects you've worked on. And now you have a really practical role, let's say, where you're very close to practical realities. How do these passions align, or where are the biggest differences where you see conceptually you can work much more sustainable rather than how it is in reality right now?
Yeah, for conceptual design, we often focus on performance-based approaches. We're not looking at BVs, or we're not looking on technologies often. We're focused more on the passive design measures and how we can make a design that's responsive, design that's built with care, let's say. We're taking into account everything around us. So the environmental factors, the social factors that are there, the cultural elements, what's surrounding the projects. Of course, we're doing this on the practical side, but the focus is shifting more towards what kind of materials that are available in the market, what kind of technologies that we can use that are available in this specific market. So it's shifting towards more about the reality of where we are and how we can materialize the product or the design. And this requires also a good market research for what's available and what's not available. We might be putting some specifications that are too ambitious. And when we look at the market, we couldn't find it. And it's very difficult. Like, for example, if we're looking for certified wood would come from a specific forests. But if you are in a location that doesn't have this kind of forests, then you have to bring it from abroad, from Europe, for example. So it's expensive. It's emitting a lot of CO2 emissions due to the different, due to the location that we're getting this from, the transportation. So it might be looking from outside as a sustainable product, but it's not local material, and it's causing a lot of CO2 emissions to be emitted to the environment. So we need to be more cautious when we're doing the actual designs. And also for conceptual designs, it's easy for us to put targets. You can simply say that we will achieve net zero, for example. But when it comes to reality and when you check how we can get to net zero carbon, for example, net zero carbon is very difficult. It's something that requires us to have everything in an entire inventory for the entire business, and to make sure that each single process or activity is also abiding by a certain carbon requirements that we set internally. All of this is not related to conceptual design. It's something that will come from the business, and it will apply to the different projects in the business. That's the reality that we're facing at the moment. So it's a big difference, to be honest. And when we work with conceptual design architects, because their designs are always beautiful, and it's always great to see projects when they are during the concept design. But when it comes to the actual reality, so many things are changing. You will have to go through a process of changes, process of value engineering, because your beautiful design during the concept is exceeding the budget by a certain amount. So you have to change a lot of things to meet the budget and to also stay with the targets that you have set during the beginning. So yeah, there are so many changes, but there should be a connection between them.
So on one hand, you've mentioned certifications and ESG principles, which are popular or important in sustainable investments. But on the other hand, it sounds like the conceptual design is also something that comes from education, so from universities. So from your perspective, where do you think these frameworks are effective, and what areas need improvement?
Yeah, I believe they are extremely effective and needed in certain contexts. So I'll give you an example. Example is Saudi Arabia, where I work at the moment. So Saudi Arabia has been implementing LEED rating system for so long, for so many years now. And the subject of sustainability was not well known here in Saudi. But with the try of the LEED rating system, and when people saw it, and they applied this into their projects, and they found that it's beneficial, not only because it's just a certificate that they use for marketing, but also for the actual results. So it gained traction here, and people are starting using it. And everyone is saying, when it comes to sustainability, let's go for LEED, because this is well known here. Previously, that was not the case, and it was just business as usual or conventional designs. But because of the LEED rating system, its popularity, it's now being applied here widely, and that's the most used rating system here. And you can expect to see in most of the giga projects and the mega projects here in Saudi, and also private developers are using LEED rating system in their developments because of its popularity, because of its credibility, because it's international, and because it delivers exceptional results as well. But this is only the beginning, and this opened the door for other sustainable practices. So you can expect to see that a company is applying different rating system. So LEED is considered the basic or the requirement that every company should do on its own, because it's voluntary, 100% voluntary. And they're trying now to apply different rating systems. You can see in some of the projects like King Salman Park, which is one of the largest parks in the world at the moment. They're applying sites rating system, and this is related to sustainable landscape. And in other projects like the Raya Gate project, which is also one of the giga projects in Saudi, it's a cultural and historic district. They're applying different rating systems. They have sites, they have Park Smart for the multi-story car parks, they have the LEED rating system, and they're applying LEED on different layers as well. So LEED has LEED for building design and construction, and they're applying this as well for LEED for cities. And they have also a local rating system that was developed in 2018, which is Mustadam rating system. And when they developed the Mustadam rating system, which is a regional or a local rating system, they were trying to focus on things that were lacking in the LEED rating system. I'll give you an example on this. So LEED requires projects to be submitting design and construction credits separately. But most of them found that this is not effective here, and it should be for all the requirements to be submitted twice, once during design and then at the end during construction, to ensure that what's designed is actually constructed and implemented. So the rating systems open the door for sustainable movement to be more prominent here in Saudi Arabia. And by the time organizations started to focus more on developing their own sustainable procedures, internal procedures. And previously it was CSR, the corporate social responsibility, and some of them started to develop their own reports, and some of them are calling this corporate sustainability reports. And then with the time, and because of the inclusion of ESG principles into the investment process, so companies started to also consider the ESG principles and abide to some of the international reporting standards like GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, or the other like IFRS and SASB, so the different kind of reporting schemes. And this allowed them also to be a more mature businesses, and this will attract investors because investors would like to make sure that they're investing in a company that has social values, that respects the environment, and make sure that they're not harming the environment by their practices or construction. So that's actually what's happening at the moment, that some of the companies, worldwide investors like BlackRock, are building at the moment a platform a platform for Saudi Arabia to ensure that these kind of principles, ESG principles, are being traced and being reported in an appropriate way. So it's gaining traction, and I hope it's also thrive in the upcoming years.
And are these all voluntary in Saudi Arabia, or is there anything like renewable energy or something like that that has to be done?
Yeah, so this is a very good question, because as long as it's voluntary, so you can expect that not everyone will do it. And at the moment, it's voluntary. But that's a big but, because here comes the rule of the government. And they have set strict targets to be followed by the entire nation. So they have 2060 net zero carbon goals. This means all the businesses should be trying to work towards the achievement of the net zero goals. So this also means that all the companies should work on decarbonization plans. They should be able to report the carbon emissions. At the moment, it's voluntary, but in a very few years, it will be mandatory for some of them to some extent. Because if we would like to reach to net zero as a whole country, then all the businesses should be contributing towards the achievement of this goal. And this will never happen if it's only voluntary. So I'm sure in the next few years, we will hear that there are some certain requirements that are mandatory for businesses to report their carbon emissions and also their maybe biodiversity impact as well. Maybe there will be some targets for the businesses. Maybe this will be part of the investment process for all the companies. If they want to be a listed public company, then they have to report or publish or disclose their environmental practices on a certain categories or according to a certain scheme. There might be a requirement for like climate change or climate resilience procedures in place for the companies, because this will also make sure that the companies who are investing are putting their money in a safe company who understands the climate change consequences and have in place some climate resilience procedures. This opens the door for so many things like biodiversity, biogain, how we're also building our projects. Are we just conserving the environment? Are we destroying the environment? Are we doing some bio-positive solutions, or what exactly we're doing? And I hope this should be or it can be mandated and required officially for all of the projects.
If you're enjoying the show, I have a small favor to ask that would mean the world to me. By rating and sharing the podcast, you're helping us grow and spreading our mission of making sustainability really desirable and cool to a wider audience. Besides of that, imagine impressing your colleagues with the latest insights on sustainable architecture. So make sure you follow the podcast and become the most informed in the room. Thank you so much for your support. Talking about climate change consequences, we've talked about the floodings that are happening in Dubai, but also in Brazil. And we've talked about building for climate resilience in another conversation we had. Yeah. Can you talk about how we can design structures to withstand urban flooding and rising sea levels?
Yeah, so basically for this topic, I prepared my dissertation about climate resilience and the role of the policies and procedures in mitigating these effects, and also in making sure that our cities are resilient, buildings and infrastructure for sure. So it's not an easy question because it involves so many parties and stakeholders. It's not only about what guidelines are there or what are the procedures that are in place. It's also the willingness of each company, because it's not mandated. It's not something that's required by each company to do. So I have seen and I have observed in Saudi Arabia that some companies are developing their own climate change procedures and climate resilience guidelines as well. All of this are voluntary, and it's something that they're doing on their own, but it's something positive. I have also observed in the codes here that they have some seismic requirements for any like hazards that will happen, but it's a bit basic and a bit old. It requires some new additions and changes. And luckily for sustainability and the application of the different rating systems in LEED, for example, the new version, LEED version 5, includes a prerequisite, which is a mandatory requirement to have a climate resilience assessment for each project. To be honest, it's required for each project. We cannot just put it or apply it on a few projects and leave the other projects without any kind of assessment. So LEED started now to look at this holistically, and they want each project that's going to be certified to undergo a resilience assessment. And of course, there are so many things that can happen, because as we discussed previously about the flooding is a phenomena that's happening because of the issues of global warming and climate change. And to be able to tackle this, we have mitigation and we have adaptation. So mitigation is basically if we would like to reduce the impacts, and not only reducing them, but trying to avoid this from happening in the first place. So instead of designing buildings that will be emitting CO2 emissions extensively, we aim to have net zero buildings or reduce the amount of CO2 emissions. That's a kind of mitigation, reducing the strain on the environment. On the other side, we need to have measures for adaptation. It's happening already, and we have to face it. Then we need to be ready. So this means in our buildings, we need to have a proper monitoring system, alarms and procedures in place, people to be trained on this. Stakeholders are also well informed when it happens. I have heard from my friends in Dubai that they were trapped in the airport. Some of them were trapped in the airport and they could not go out of the plane because of the floods. And they were staying there for hours and hours. And there should be a proper procedures for reporting, maybe. So yeah, it's not a simple solution, but it includes so many factors and facets that needs to be well understood and also well communicated.
And what advice would you give developers now to build more resilient buildings?
It's something I consider as a must. Any new building should be adaptable to a different kind of hazards. So it should start with assessing the hazards. What kind of hazards that will be applicable to my building? Is it only flooding? Is it dust storms? Is it water scarcity? What exactly is the hazards that I'm facing in this specific region and this specific location? Based on the hazards that I have, there should be a risk assessment, a vulnerability assessment to understand whether it's severe, whether it's negligible, or it's something that will happen anyway. Based on all this, we will be able to take decisions. But certainly there should be design measures, construction measures, and operational measures as well in place. So once this happens, I know how to act and how also to communicate with the other people. All my stakeholders will be affected. It's not only my employees. If I'm building a shopping mall, so all the visitors will be affected. How to communicate with the public. It's not a matter of only having some guidelines and not using them. It's a matter of communicating this properly and monitoring also for the future.
And what policies do you think are needed to support these initiatives?
Yes, it's needed. And because of the lack of some policies in different locations and in different countries, the companies are not willing to invest time and cost in developing these kind of strategies and guidelines. And even to include this kind of studies in their projects, it's money. So everyone is translating this into money. Any kind of study, any kind of engagement with a consultant is an additional budget that needs to be paid. But if it's required by law or it's a policy that needs to be followed, all of them will do it. It's just something that they have to do. It's a mandatory thing. But as long as it's voluntary, you can expect that only like the big giants on the market or the people or the companies who are willing to receive investments will be doing this. But not all of them will be doing this. So I support this, of course, that there should be policies in place. There should be people who are making sure that the policies are achieved like codes. So the codes are mandatory. And some also code officials are chasing the code implementation. And I believe this should be the same for climate resilience, either to be part of the codes, maybe a dedicated code for climate resilience, because it's scattered around the different codes. You can see that under the sustainability or green building codes, there are something related to rainwater management and flooding. And under the structural codes, there's something related to the structural engineering of the building and how it can withstand any kind of hazards. And then under the water section or the water code, there are some requirements related to water efficiency, and this is also tackling the water scarcity. And then some other requirements under the energy code for the U values and the thermal transmittance and these kind of requirements. So it's very difficult to chase all this if it's scattered around different codes, and each code has its own like officials and people who are chasing the implementation for the code. I prefer to have all of this under one code, and then people will be starting really to focus on this.
You mentioned big giants before, and that brings me to the next question. I want to talk about Project Neom and the Line. These are ambitious developments in the Red Sea. Yeah. In your opinion, what elements make these projects sustainable, and where do they fall short?
For Neom, I see that they're building very innovative and highly technological projects. And I believe I did not see something like this anywhere in the world. And this is their, like the highest ambitious for them. And that's their biggest strength, that they're building something that was never built before. And I spoke with some people also who were working there, and they said that we have things that were never built before, and we're still investigating how we can do it. And that's intuitive, and that's great to hear. But on the other side, you can see that it's very also difficult from sustainability point of view and environmental point of view, because we're seeing a development that's happening in the desert, and that's an ecosystem on its own. So by building anything on the desert, you are disrupting the ecosystem. that's a challenge, to be honest, because also the line, you're intervening into the desert with a huge structure, and the disruption to the ecosystem is going to happen anyway. But what's happening with, like any other development, when you were developing a building, of course you're consuming resources and you're using the raw materials. But when you look at any kind of development, you are going to lose resources. But if you never built it, it will be most sustainable. But of course, you have to build something because of the social aspects. At least you have to continue building and continue the development. So we're developing anyway in any place in the world. The matter is, and the most important thing is to build with care, build responsibly, and make sure that you're not harming the environment. So it's a challenge to be able to build something in the desert and at the same time to preserve the environment. And I have seen that they went deep into investigating the possibility of preserving the environment there and sustainability practices and efforts. And I've seen that they're applying so many rating systems, any kind of rating system you can expect, you will find it there in Neom. I believe this is a kind of mitigation to what they are doing in this region and in this part of the country. Also, one of the main issues in the line is that it's also touching on the marine life, and when it goes there, it's an untouched life. It's a purely natural life, and there are some construction activities happening there, which is something that requires special attention from the people who are working there. But again, I spoke with some people working there, and they told me about what's happening in their efforts for sustainability. There will be 100% renewable energy. There will be some plant nurseries dedicated for the project. So it's not about bringing trees from elsewhere. No, it's going to be there. They have so many also disciplines within the sustainability team for circular economy, for biodiversity, for the environment, and how they are preserving the aquatic life. So yeah, I see it's a huge challenge for the environment and sustainability, but I see also they're doing very well.
Let me know if I'm saying it wrong, but they are kind of falling into all these rating systems, but still harming the ecosystem a lot.
Any construction development will harm the ecosystem anywhere. If you're building anything on a bare land or a green field, it will harm the ecosystem. It will make some changes in the ecosystem. So the challenge will be how you're going to make some biogain and return and conserve the environment in these areas. The harm will happen anywhere, but that's not only the thing that you have to look at. You have also to look at the benefits of what you're doing and also how you're going to mitigate this. If there is a mitigation plan in place, and if you're aware about what's happening in terms of the environmental harms, then you can mitigate this by certain practices. I have heard a lot of their plans about how they're going to mitigate this, but it's about seeing this happen maybe after a few years, because now it's still early on. Now, now it's a matter of designing, and then what's happening at the moment is just infrastructure. So we did not see yet the actual structures in the line specifically. But for Neom itself, there are so many projects that are ongoing, very advanced in the construction stages as well.
And as a more conceptual side of yours, have you worked on a concept of how these projects could work in a more sustainable way?
For concept, no. All right. So when I was working as a consultant, some of these projects were coming to our office. But we were a specialist consultancy. So we used to only work on sustainability kind of things. So we used to collaborate with architects, and they were developing the concepts, and we were providing them with suggestions on how to be more sustainable. We're developing for them the strategies, sustainability strategies, like circular economy, energy consumption, water consumption, and how to also adjust your building to suit these targets. And we were also assessing their projects against different rating systems. So they have infrastructure rating system like Envision, which is a US rating system. They have another rating system for infrastructure from Australia. They're applying all the kind of rating systems that you can imagine, like LEED, WELL, sites, and all these rating systems are applied there to the different projects for sure. And when we were designing this, it was a challenge, to be honest, for some of these rating systems. It's new to the market, like Envision. Envision is new. No one is using Envision rating system here in Saudi Arabia, except them, Neom. So it's a new rating system for all of our team. And we were experiencing this as a new initiative, a new rating system, how it would work in the market. We were a bit ambitious as well because it's something new for us to learn, something new for the project to apply it. Yeah, it's also a good challenge for us, to be honest.
So now looking towards the future, what do you envision as the next major breakthrough in sustainable architecture?
Yeah, the focus will be more towards carbon emissions and how we can make our developments less intensive in emitting carbon. And this is only one part for sure, because all of the things that we are thinking about are going to be part of the design, like climate resilience. This should be part of the design process. Carbon emissions, how we're going to reduce the carbon. A life cycle assessment should be part of each developed project from early on, from the concept design stage. A greater collaboration between all people to have some more focused sessions about carbon emissions and how we can reduce the carbon from different disciplines, from a structural point of view, from architectural point of view, from MEP systems as well. And always the MEP systems falls short in terms of carbon emissions, and people are mostly concerned about the concrete and steel. These are the two giants, or the two mega emitters of CO2 emissions. But the other elements as well are crucial, and it consists like 40% of the building or more. So we need also to take care of this during design. Yeah, that's at least my passion at the moment is the carbon emission reduction.
Very interesting to see you also compare the different point of views from different peoples in different areas in the world. I like that. So Karim, before we finish off, can you showcase one sustainable project or structure from around the world that you really like and that you want to think we have to talk about more?
There are so many projects. I'll mention one internationally and one local. For the international one, it's a building called Bosco Verticale. I guess it's very well known because it's, when you look at it, you will expect that this is a green building because it's full of vegetation, and it's a building that's like a tree, not just a normal structure. And the beauty about this is that the ecosystem is not only preserved, but you are bringing a lot of insects and birds to life. And I really like this idea that you're building something to benefit the environment, not only to be mitigating the effects or limiting the negative consequences, but here you're developing something positive for the environment. You can look at it and see that they have like a farm in each floor or a vegetation that's coming out of the building. And I really like this idea and that approach in design. And the amount of CO2 absorbed by this building is also enormous, because each tree or each vegetation or plant will absorb some of the CO2 emissions in the planet. So I really like this design, and I hope to see more like it.
So just a second for our listeners, Bosco Verticale is, I think, two residential towers in Milano, which are like, the balconies are like completely covered in trees and plants. So I like how you described this as like an urban tree.
Yeah, it's like an urban tree inside of a dense environment, and an entire ecosystem is back to life with this building. I can mention another building here in Saudi. It's a totally different building, totally different environment. And it's Diriyah Gate, one of the also biggest projects here in Saudi. And why I'm mentioning this, because it's a historical project. And it's a matter of designing with the local materials that you are developing in your own project site, and they are using mud bricks to build the facades. It's called Najdi architecture. It's an old style of architecture here in Saudi. And it's also one of the few projects that achieved LEED Platinum certification because of the design of the master plan, where it's completely pedestrian oriented. And they have an entire layer of transportation system beneath the city that includes the different modes of transportation, like from buses to taxis, e-scooters, and different modes of sustainable mobility. And they're relying, of course, on some of their projects are relying on renewable energy, not all of them, because they want to maintain the identity of that historical sense without having contemporary intrusions like renewable energy, like BVs on top of their buildings. So it's a unique project from architectural perspective, and they're applying different rating system, LEED for buildings, for each building, and most of them certification. And also for the entire site, they have the LEED for cities. It's a very nice project.
A lot of certifications.
Yeah, so many.
Thank you very much for sharing all your interesting insights. It was a super interesting conversation. If our listeners want to follow your work and see what you do, where can they find you?
On LinkedIn. That's like the easiest way where people can find me. I have also a channel on YouTube because I provide some courses on LEED rating systems. So it's also available on Udemy website.
Maybe you can give to the developers or homeowners like one last tip from a LEED certification side.
Yeah, this is also a very good one because in our normal daily life, we are not, we're not focused on these practices. But for example, for me, I hate to throw anything, any empty box, any empty bottle. I feel it's like a waste, and I need to like reduce the amount of waste, and I hope that I can recycle it someday. I'm just taking this around, but I hate throwing this away. And if they look at the water usage as well, they need to focus on having some aerators on the faucets to be able to preserve some water. You have to take care when they're using the showers, not to exceed the amount of, because each time they're using the shower, it's a lot of liters being wasted. Also, when they're using the toilets for flushing, they have to know that each flush will cause like minimum 4 liters of wasted water. So yeah, it's things that they have to watch, and each small action will contribute towards a more sustainable future.
That's a beautiful ending. Thank you so much, Karim.
Thank you so much for having me.
A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at LadinaShip. Thanks.